We've now configured the rig and the muscle definitions and all the animation data for the character that we're going to be using in our box pushing game. So it's time to insert that character into the level and to start to get it working and the animations playing in game. So let's see how to do that. I'm just going to press stop here on the preview panel and just move over here into the scene. And I'll add the character to the level. So I'm going to drag and drop the character just anywhere into the level like so. And I'm going to reset their position back to the level beginning here. Let's just find them in the level and take a look at how they're oriented. So they're positioned there in the level. That's absolutely fine. It doesn't really matter right now where they're positioned. I just want to get the animation data playing. You can see that automatically when I add this character to the level that an animator component has been attached to the character. Now let's just take a look at how this scene works in game. What I want to do is just move my viewport to around about there so that we can see the character quite clearly. I'm just going to select the camera in the scene and I'm going to choose Game Object and align with View to align the character with the view. As I do that, you will see over here in the camera preview that the camera will align to the viewport here as it does, so that now when I press the play button on the toolbar we can see the character clearly in the scene. And you'll notice that straight away no animation is playing on the character at all. The character is perfectly still. And the way we control the animation logic that is playing on the character is to use an animator controller, an animation controller, beg your pardon, an animation controller asset. So let's add one of those now. I'm just going to stop playback here and move over to a folder that I've created here with the assets. I've created a folder called animation, which is going to contain all of the animation data that we create for this character. So I'm just going to open up this folder, right click in the project panel, choose create, and somewhere in this list, unfortunately it appears outside the recording window, but that's not really a problem. I can come up here instead to the file menu and choose assets, create, and in this list you will see animation controller. Careful, there are some other things that we can create. For example, we could create animation, or we could create animation override controller, but no, I want to create an animator controller like so, and we can see that here in the project panel. I'm just going to name this to char controller and press enter on the keyboard. When I do that, the animation controller is created. Now the way that we can actually view the contents of this controller is by switching over here to the animator tab. You can also access this tab by choosing window and animator. Again, take care because there's another window called animation which refers to the legacy system. You don't want that, you want the animator. So I'm going to switch over to the animator tab and you can see that we have this state machine defined here. Now I'm just going to shrink the object inspector as far as I can. I'm going to shrink the hierarchy panel as far as I can, and this also the project panel, I can't shrink that anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this tab for the animator and dock it over here so that we can see the scene view and the animator all in one here, and that sort of makes things a bit clearer for us. So we have this animator window here, and I can hold down the middle mouse wheel on the mouse button here to sort of scroll around this tab like so. So we have this animator, and this controls the logic for the animation. Now right now if I press play on the toolbar, again we can still see in the viewport that the character is not animating. What we need to do first is to select the character in the scene. And you will see that for the animator component we have this controller field where we have to specify an animator controller to use for this character that's going to be controlling the animation logic. To do that I'm going to drag and drop my char controller onto the controller field and release, and now this controller is associated with this character. Again, if I press the play button on the toolbar we see something has changed. The character is now in some kind of default posture. But this is not what we want, and still it's not animated. But we are making progress, so I'm going to press stop on the toolbar. Now let's say, for example, I want the character to be in its walking pose. Well, okay, we can do that quite easily. I'm going to move over here to the meshes folder, open up the character folder, and open out our character mesh. And you can see that we have the animation clips we've defined earlier, the idle, cheer, the walk, and the push animation. So I want to make the walking animation the default one. I can click and drag that into the animator window, and now I've loaded it in, and you can see that it's colored orange. It's colored orange because it's the default animation. We've defined the animation to be loopable. So now when I press play on the toolbar, you'll see now the character is walking along, and you can see that the animation is playing repeatedly. If I switch to the scene tab, you can see that the character is just walking off into the distance, and that really isn't what we want at all, because we want the character to walk in place. We want him to walk on the spot, and we want to control his movement independently. We don't want the animation controlling that. So we can easily fix that. I'm just going to press stop on the toolbar and switch back to our character into the scene. You can see it here. I want to ensure that apply root motion on the animator component. I want to make sure that apply root motion is not checked. So I want to remove that tick box there, switch back to the game tab and press play on the toolbar, and now the character is walking in place, and that is looking good. We've got this character walking and he's remaining on the spot. Okay, he's walking through the floor just a little bit, but we can raise the character up into the scene. That's not too much of a problem. So ensure that you remove the check from apply root motion. So we've got the character up and running and walking. Of course, we don't actually want the walk animation to play by default. Instead, we want the idle animation to play instead. So let's just come in here, select the walk animation, delete that. Yes, I want to delete it. Let's drag and drop the idle animation into there. That is now going to be the default. I want to press play on the toolbar, and now the character is standing in the idle posture in the scene. You can see from this progress bar, so long as this character here is selected, you can see the idle animation is playing on a loop. We reach the end, it goes back to the beginning, it's playing again, and the idle animation is playing. So that's how we can get started at animating our character in the scene.